November, OUTshine Film Festival's Fort Lauderdale Virtual Edition, featuring queer films from all over the world. Presenting 18 feature films and 3 shorts programs, plus a drive-in movie night at Pier 66. Watch the best LGBTQ plus films from home. Tickets are on sale now. Check out the program at OUTshineFilm.com.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victor Gimenez. I'm the Executive Director of the OUTshine LGBTQ Plus Film Festival. On behalf of the board, the staff, and the volunteers, welcome to our virtual Q&A for Ask Anybody. I'd also like to thank our presenting sponsor, Gilead and Broward County. So let's get the ball rolling. First, let me introduce the Director of Ask Anybody, Evan Purchell. Evan, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. And then we also have in the room, bringing him in right now, our Director of Programming for OUTshine, Joe Bilancio.
Hey, all you OUTshiners. Thank you for being here.
All right. So, Joe, let's get the ball rolling.
Evan. So many questions. Let's start with sort of your background, because I think that could impinge on sort of where the conversation goes. But are you a director? Are you an editor? It seems like so many things rolled into creating this film. And then sort of from there, it's like, what was the impetus for this particular film?
I've always had an interest in editing, not really professionally. So first time I've ever edited something this long. I think my background is more kind of as a historian. For the past 3 or 4 years now, I've been doing research into the history of this genre, the gay adult film genre. And I've been running an Instagram feed called Ask Anybody, and then the film kind of sprung out of that. I was asked by the programmers of a local small queer film festival called Contrast to make something for an event they were doing, and that's kind of what really got me working on this, and it kind of all went from there.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Did you sort of have the story in mind and then found clips to sort of tell that story, or did you just watch like thousands of hours of film and then sort of came up with a story from there? How did the genesis of Ask Anybody come?
I'd already seen most of these films, so that was kind of the easy part, but it was really kind of tricky finding a structure to kind of build everything around. That's, I think, the thing that was the hardest part for me is I wanted something that would flow together really well, that wouldn't get too bogged down in sex or anything like that, but didn't try to hide it. And I kept coming up with all these different ideas. Maybe it'll be a road trip from like the West Coast to the East Coast, or maybe it'll be this, or maybe it'll be that. And then I really started thinking about how a lot of academics think of these films as almost being like documentary, because they feature these locations that are no longer around and these sexual practices and things like that. So thinking about that, I was like, if I have all these hours of documentary footage, I should be able to construct a day in the life through that. And that was kind of really what got me going on like how this came together. And then from there, it was basically coming up with all these different ideas for like locations or settings, and then building each one of them separately and then combining them all together in a way that worked well.
And then Evan, you actually did a really good cohesive job of kind of basically telling that story. I want to kind of backtrack, because you said you were like, basically doing the history of this specific genre. One of the things I'm kind of, I noticed in the film was like, in that history was basically the majority of all this film was just basically, white gay men. I mean, were there not many people, any films with people of color, or that was the ones that were made and that's what people watched?
I mean, there's certainly films from that time that feature people of color, mostly Black men, not so really Asian, some Latinx people. That's just kind of what was in demand back then, really. It's not really until the 80s with the rise of VHS and video productions that you really start seeing specialized markets kind of sprout up for those types of people, even though it's in like a really sort of fetishy way, which is gross. But I tried to make this film as inclusive as I could. I grabbed every piece of footage I could find that had people of color in it to try to make it a little less white basically. So, but you can only work with what you got basically.
No, definitely. The other amazing thing, and it just caught my attention. Like, let's say the scene on the subway, also the scene in the public bath. It's that guerrilla style filmmaking that it just makes you tense because, like, wow, they're actually physically there. There's people in that subway train that don't know what's going on. And what if someone kind of freaks out about, like, when they see what's kind of going on? I mean, was there a lot of in the all the footage that all the 126 films that you went through? I mean, was there a lot of that? I mean, did they all have that tenseness there?
Oh, I mean, a lot of them were shot. I think it's mostly New York films and San Francisco films where you see a lot of that sort of guerrilla filmmaking. With the subway sequence, I didn't actually include the sex scene part of it, but Peter Jerome, the director of one of the films that I used in that, actually had like a really great story about them spending something like 12 hours on the subway shooting all the seduction during the day and then shooting the actual sex scene late at night, and then not realizing until they were done shooting that there was like a bum passed out like right in the corner behind where all the action was going on. But yeah.
Yeah, it's like anything. There's sort of, I think we had these conversations about the love affair with the grimy, gritty New York and San Francisco tenderloin of the past, and sort of how that doesn't exist now. Do you sort of feel the same way from a historical level, that it really is a very different porn that's made today is a very, I don't want to say mechanical or methodical or generic, but it does seem that it has some of that. Can you speak a little bit about that sort of as a historian? The grunge of the past versus the today?
Sure. I mean, what was I going to say? No, sorry, I'm blanking on this one.
That's okay. Yeah, just sort of the grunginess, the grittiness of New York and San Francisco in the 70s, and today sort of being less grungy and less, and for some people that may be good, for other people they may miss those sort of days of excitement and energy that seems different.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really kind of going off that, one of the things that's really interesting to me about these films is how films that were made in each sort of region have a completely different feel. Like you were saying, the New York ones are very gritty. The San Francisco ones are kind of weird and still kind of like have a bit of the lingering hippie sort of experimental psychedelic sort of feeling to them. And then the Los Angeles ones are very clean. Very clean cut, but also can be kind of grimy. I mean, I think so many things have changed over the past couple decades. These films kind of do offer really some of the only footage of these locations and of this sort of sensibility, which is something I think is so invaluable.
Yeah, it's certainly a time capsule of the time, and we appreciate that, and many of us who are of that day sort of are appreciating that. How many hours did you actually watch? And was it, you said you were sort of familiar with sort of these films, but actually sitting down and creating and making the edits, and talk a little bit about that process and how long it took, and sort of the overall effort.
So basically, when I started working on it, I made this list of all these sort of scenarios I wanted to explore, and then from there, I was kind of going off my memory and writing down all the films that I knew that kind of fit those sort of scenarios. And I think it took about 6 months to put together the first edit of it for the premiere at the Contrast Film Festival. Really, I mean, finding the actual films and the clips actually wasn't really that much. There wasn't really the hard part. It was just kind of finding a way to make everything kind of fit together and be enjoyable, not be obnoxious or unpleasant. One of my original ideas was to keep the audio from each and every film, but realizing that if the soundtrack was changing every 10 seconds, it would just be completely unenjoyable. It was the party sequences and the bar sequence, which were the two that were like the most tough, because because these films always have the bar scenes in these movies are always just like filled with like blaring music, so I had to pick one to kind of build the entire sequence around. and then the party one because I thought there were more movies that were set at parties, but there really weren't. So I kind of had to cheat that a little bit by using some more bar footage and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like your memory, and then when you actually set out to do something concrete, that they're a little different. Well, I think it was wonderfully crafted, and so I appreciated that.
Yeah, and then your comment about the use of music to kind of tie everything together is something I definitely noticed. Where like you did have all this footage scored, and it does create a cohesion. How did it? I mean, did you have like basically a musician come in and take care of it for you? Were you able to do it yourself? Like, how did you actually score the film?
I didn't add anything to this film. Everything is from the actual movies. So, yeah.
Okay, I didn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's say these films are underground productions, and they knew that people would never admit to going to see them. So I don't think they really worried too much about music rights, to put it a little vaguely. So
yeah,
and that's a good point. I don't. Were all of the films in sort of a, say, public domain, or did you have to get the rights or clear rights, or talk a little bit about that, sort of the background of the films themselves and the public usage of it?
Most of them are in the public domain. There's some that are owned by different companies. I use them under fair use because I'm radically reworking them and kind of putting them in a different context and making a new work out of them. So that was my approach to using the films. Sadly, a lot of the people who own these films are no longer with us. A lot of them passed away in the 80s or 90s. So they're just kind of in limbo, really.
Yeah, and again, that's the other fascinating thing, is that it was such a look at the time frame and the people of that time without really focusing on those people. And the talking heads, I think we see a lot of those documentaries, but this was such an unusual and intriguing way to sort of to support, say, hey, they were here, and these are the people, and these are the people who made them, and getting the people to sort of think about that in a different context than they might in other ways. So thank you for doing that as well. Did you get the do you now have like a filmmaking bug? I mean, before you said you were sort of an editor, is there anything that, like, in this process made you think about, maybe I'd like to do that, or do something very similar on a different topic? Or talk a little bit about that.
I have a couple of different ideas that I've been working through. One of them is a compilation of trailers for these movies, making like an hour 15 long compilation that also kind of cuts some of them down to make it more watchable. Another thing I've been kind of toying around with is there are some of these movies that were made in gay and heterosexual versions, using the same locations, using the same plots, some of the same actors. So I kind of want to try to find a way to mess around with those and kind of cut them together and kind of explore the differences between each. So those are kind of like my two things that I'm working on. I
learned something today. I had no clue. So I always say any day you learn something is a good day. So it's been a good day. Thank you for that. I had no clue that there was a heterosexual and a homosexual version of. Wow.
Actually, that's a great idea, and I hope you put it together, because it'd be kind of interesting to see how you actually tie everything together and just make one play off the other. It'd be. Yeah. It would mess with people's heads, I think, watching.
Like there's the famous Gerard Damiano film, The Devil and Miss Jones. A few years after that, a gay man made The Devil and Mr. Jones, which has the exact same script as The Devil and Miss Jones, except it's more of a camp version of it. So there's a lot of different examples of things like that.
That's cool. Do you ever think you'd like to do a live act, not porn necessarily, but a live a live script, or is that something that you would leave to other people?
Maybe sometime in the future. I mean, I think my kind of passion is more editing and more archival and historian work, really.
Yeah, I think people always make the assumption, like people think that I work for a film festival, so I want to make films. I have no desire. I would not be good. I like to look at them and present them, but I have no desire to make one. How did you get interested in this sort of historical aspect of porn, or other things if you're a historian in general? But it's such an interesting sort of topic to think about and say, yes, I'm going to learn all I can about that.
Yeah, so I've been kind of a big fan of exploitation and genre filmmaking pretty much my whole life. a few years ago, I caught a screening of Wakefield Pool's Bijou in Orlando. Actually, I was living in Tampa at the time. My partner and I drove all the way up to Orlando for that. And that was kind of the film that really kind of opened my eyes to this. And then after that, I saw Kurt McDowell's Thundercrack. I saw Fred Halstead's LA Plays Itself. And like these three films combined kind of like really opened something in my head. And when I get interested in something, I want to know all about it. So I started watching, like tracking down more movies. I started looking them up in magazines and things like that. And then kind of somewhere along the way, I realized that these films, in their day, they were kind of a really major part of gay culture. They were heavily featured in magazines like The Advocate. They were reviewed like films. They were in newspapers. And that's something that really fascinated me. And that was kind of the impetus for the Instagram account that I started, is to really take some sort of pride in this history and the fact that these people risked so much to make these movies and were so much a dominant part of gay visual culture at the time, to try to get this imagery back out in the world instead of kind of buried in magazines and newspapers and things like that.
Bravo. Victor and I have the same conversation all the time of classics, and I even mean like recent classics, not even like Thundercrack and Bijou and these, Wakefield Pools and these wonderful, really engrossing films. And we have such a difficulty in trying to get those into the public and then people to consume them. And, I know other festivals might be able to do that a little more relevant and a little, with an audience. And it's just frustrating to me that they're such a part of culture and they're such interesting movies, and we just can't get audiences for them. So again, I appreciate what you're doing and trying to highlight and trying to get people enthused, because you're obviously enthused and excited about them. And I love that energy. And, that's what we need in order to get people to take a look at these things.
Evan, out of curiosity, like once this film kind of has its festival run, what's your ultimate goal for it? Like, do you hope that it's like in some type of like archive where people can, go watch it, or like a museum kind of takes it? Like after it's had its festival run, where do you see the film going after that, or where do you hope it goes?
I am a little wary of the art world. I don't really have any interest in that. It has a theatrical distributor, the American Genre Film Archive, so hopefully we get more bookings after the festival run is over. Whenever theaters are able to safely reopen, I'd love to have it play more. I'm not sure about like a physical like DVD release or anything like that because of all the rights. But I mean, when I made this film, I really thought it would play at this one little festival and that'd be kind of the end. I had no clue that, other people would be interested in it, or that it'd have like an actual festival run or all these things. So I've just kind of been winging it this whole time.
How do you think that happened?
What's that?
How do you think that happened? Do you know, did like somebody see it at Contrast and was involved with another festival? But because things like this, tend to snowball, and you always sort of wonder how that happens. And I don't know if you knew, sort of the process of that, going from the one festival to, many others.
Yeah, I just started kind of submitting it to just a couple random festivals because I wasn't sure if anyone would be interested in. I think when it was picked up by BFI Flair was really when the ball started rolling. And then even more so when it got into Outfest earlier this year.
Excellent. So I think, Evan, thank you very much for your time. I'm sure, I know my audience pretty well. I'm sure a lot of them they like your film. I think quite a few will probably remember, or definitely have a sense of the clips that you used and brought back memories and the whole thing. And I actually, the whole story of how it came about, it is fascinating that, you were able to take this passion of yours for this very specific type of subset of films, and then you actually turned it into something that, grew from one thing, which was what it was supposed to be for, and then all of a sudden it's been expanded to more people to enjoy. So I'm very happy that your passion got turned into something that more than just, that one small festival is going to get to enjoy.
Yeah.
And then I think, with that, we're going to show the trailer of the film.
I think Evan had one last comment.
Oh,
yeah. I just want to say, for anyone out there who enjoys the film and wants to know more, we kind of have we created a spin-off of the film, my friend Tyler Thomas and I, which is a podcast that we're doing, which is looking at each and every single one of the films used in my film and really kind of diving into the history behind each and kind of their connections to gay culture at large. And going through the plots a little bit, but also kind of connecting these films to, like, again, just gay history at large and gay culture at large. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and at ask-any-buddy.com. Check it out. I think people have been really enjoying it so far. So I think people who like the film will get something out of it.
So, Evan, can you repeat again where can they watch it?
It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and at ask-any-buddy.com. The podcast is just called Ask Anybody, same as the film. So,
well, I also need to say thank you again, not only for bringing us this remarkable film, but also doing what you do for classic gay cinema, because I for one also think it's very important. And again, thank you for your time and keep creating great stuff. So
yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Evan, is that the correct podcast that I put there, or I can still edit it so that way we'll run it through the trailer and people can see it?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. All right, then we'll run the trailer for everybody, and thank you everybody for being.
Stay safe. Thanks, Victor. Thanks, all you Outshiners.
Thanks, guys.
Hi, my name's Mark, and I'm an actor in gay porno movies, which is what this movie's all about. 10 years ago, gay porno didn't exist. Now we've started documenting our sexuality so that people of the future can see what got us off in the 70s. Well, that's the end of my rap. Time for me to hit the bricks. Goodbye.